Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, I have some stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start today, make sure to check out the Karma Stories Patreon over at patreon.com/Karma Stories. There, you can join the Karma crew where I release completely exclusive stories that are a little too much for YouTube or for Spotify. The last one I released over there was extremely NSFW, so just keep that in mind, but you can check it out for yourself at patreon.com/Karma Stories. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Theory Large. Manager said I was useless at my job, showed him exactly why. This was about 20 years ago, so some of the dialogue won't be exact, but some of it is burned into my memory. At the time, I was working in a toy shop and it was coming up on Christmas, so you can imagine how busy we were. No, busier than that. Each worker was given a specific section of the store to keep tidy and stocked. Mine at the time was what we called boys' toys, all the action figures and so on. However, I was also the only person other than managers who could process refunds, exchanges, and so on. And because boys' toys was right beside the tills, and the managers could be anywhere, no radios, the cashiers got into the habit of calling me for help. And it being nearly Christmas, there were a lot of exchanges, refunds, and other things needing my intervention. Our store was franchised, and we had a district manager, D, because he was kind of a D, and also his name starts with D, who had never worked the floor a day in his life, and had some kind of business degree. He visited a few weeks before Christmas, came into Boys Toys an hour or so before closing, and got mad because it was messy, and there were some gaps in the shelves. He refused to listen to my attempted explanations and stormed off. Next morning, he was right there at opening time. When we had our pre-start meeting where sections were assigned, he interrupted our manager to say, "I'm putting myself with OP today. She clearly doesn't know how to handle the section, so I'm gonna show her what's what." There was an awkward silence for a moment before manager went on with assignments. I kept perfectly silent. D trailed me to Boys Toys and looked around. "Well, what's first? Or don't you have a plan?" "Well, first, oh, sorry, that's the tills calling for help. I'll be back in a minute." Dealt with the tills, returned, got halfway through explaining the first job, and was called away again. By the time I got back, it was 15 minutes into shift, and he hadn't done any work yet. I have to give it to him, he stuck with it all day. I finally managed to show him what we were doing, and he schlepped up to the stockroom and down to the shelves half a dozen times. Tidied the same set of shelves because kids love throwing things all over the floor. Watched as I was called away an average of 5 times an hour. I didn't usually keep track, but you bet your butt I did that day. He took his lunch when I did, 10 minutes late because of a refund. He didn't apologize, of course. I was too lowly for that. But the next morning at the opening meeting, my manager announced that from now on, Boys Toys would have 2 staff as a matter of course, and that the managers would make an effort to be more available to the tills. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called I Want Short Nick. It says, "Well, apologies would be nice, but besides that, he figured it out by assigning one more employee to your section." You know, I'm having a hard time seeing the district manager as a bad person in this story. They saw that there was an issue, and they decided to put themselves into that department to see why there was an issue. Once they saw what the problem was, they made the changes, got another employee in that section, and made sure the managers would be more available to the tills. It sounds to me like that's more of a win for the district manager than anything. I guess the only thing they could have done better was actually listen to OP in the beginning about the reasoning for what was going on, but they decided to see it for themselves. I can still understand that as well. This story comes to us from Talk for Real. Dump all the leftovers? Fine, here are $10,000 in losses. I recently started a new job at a buffet. So far, it's great. We're divided into 2 groups. I'll call them the preparation and mixing groups. I'm in the preparation group, where we prepare ingredients and proportions and give it to the mixing group who actually make the drink, pour it, and overall deal with customers. Sometimes, the very bottom of the mixer is no longer in proportion to the business standards. An ingredient or two or less is missing. So they give us the mixer with that extra bit that we were allowed to pour in a cup and drink for ourselves while working. It's really cool. But turns out, when my coworkers told me about it, they apparently had to fight for such a privilege. FYI, this story doesn't have anything to do with me personally. It happened months, if not years ago, and my coworkers told me about it, and I'm now sharing it. So they used to do exactly like we do today, having the extras, etc. But then, one day, the manager found out and he was outraged. He started yapping about employee responsibilities and how drinking smoothies while working is wasting time. Somehow drinking water for the exact same amount of time is allowed, but smoothies aren't. And told them all to dump all the extras in the sink regardless of what's happening. Of course, nobody listened and they still drank, but one day he saw someone drink again and had him fired. He was fired for drinking a leftover cup of fruit juice, and then he said this exact quote, "Dump all the leftovers. I don't care the amount, dump it all." After a while, the mixing group heard of the incident and they were righteously furious. After a careful read of their contracts, they're the only ones to have contracts. Most of the preparation group is underaged, including me, so no contract. They found the lines about proportion policy and saw that it was a lot more strict than what the manager was enforcing. And they devised a plan. The mixing group would intentionally have most of the ingredients on top of the mixer, so that after the mixing group is done with the pouring, more or less half the mixer is no longer in proportion and is considered leftover. And as per instructions, it gets dumped. It was a lot. One mixer usually adds up to 4 or 5 cups. Now it was 2, hardly 3. Nobody would drink the rest. Rather, it's all going to the sink. And considering the smoothies we make featured ingredients that are pretty freaking expensive, upper management started noticing that something is up with the calculations. This dumping continued for months apparently, and when upper management ran the calculations, they found that it doesn't add up in the slightest. The amount of avocado, dates, figs, etc. was about half that amount in sales, which was expected on our end. One day, they stormed the store questioning everyone because the losses over time were estimated in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. They asked around and they were told the story. Manager didn't know crap and couldn't respond to them, but the preparation group said that the manager told them to dump everything, and so they did. Let's just say there's a reason I couldn't recognize the manager they were talking about. Also, weirdly, the old manager, in the time it took for upper management to fire him, couldn't fire the mixing group. Something about probable reason or contract expiration or whatever. I'm not in touch with it legally, but it turns out he just couldn't. I don't know why, and I'm not one to question it. I guess the moral is, don't piss off your workers when they're being massively overworked and being paid about 2/3 of minimum wage. Alright, so this one was a little oddly worded, but I think I got the idea that they were told to dump all the leftovers and not consume them themselves, and then they decided there would be a lot more leftovers to dump, and that led to huge losses. But holy crap, how does it lead to $10,000+ in losses? Like OP said in the title. That's a ton of product they're tossing out. Anybody who works in an industry like this, let me know how much fruit you'd have to toss out to get to that $10,000 number. This story comes to us from I Don't Want to Sign In. Don't want to play? No problem. I've worked in computer security for a very long time. A security policy that I'm sure most of the audience here is familiar with is that you always lock your computer when you walk away. Even if you're an accountant or a receptionist, you just can't leave your machine unlocked ever. About 10 years ago, my team would have fun with this. If you ran to the bathroom or even had a conversation with your back turned, someone would sneak up to your computer and jump on the chat client or even email and say something silly or stupid like, "Does anyone know the meaning of life?" or some random thing. A lot of the teams would do this, and it was mostly harmless, but also was supposed to shame you into remembering to lock your computer before you walk away, without reporting you to security for your formal reprimand, retraining, write-ups, disciplinary action, job hunt. Everyone knew it was good-natured, and when the messages went out, everyone had a good laugh. One day, a new guy shows up and he leaves his computer unattended. I introduce myself, shake his hand, chat him up a bit, and finally tell him he needs to lock his computer when he walks away. It's company policy. He probably ignored that in the training, but it's a big deal. Sent him the documentation because he thinks it's stupid. Again, we're in the security umbrella. He says, whatever. I shrug, walk away, and he walks away making a show of not locking his computer. He got multiple warnings over his first few weeks from his team and others, but was a complete butthole about it. After a while, the team decides he's had enough warnings and started being granted access to sensitive stuff, and so he was fair game. Not long after, I walked by him on his way to the elevator atrium, so I knew he's going to be gone for a while. I sit down, find his email client, and type out a silly message to his team's DL, and hit send. As I'm standing up, he's walking back. He finds me and demands to know what I was doing. I shrug, say whatever, and walk away. Later that day, his manager walks up and tells me that he explained the situation to his new employee and that the new guy didn't want to play that game and was considering reporting me to security for impersonating him. Really? Okay, no problem, Mr. Manager. We were on very good terms. We will not play the game with your newbie. I will follow standard procedures. I got my team and a few others on chat to tell them that under no circumstances should anybody fire a message from him when they saw his computer unlocked. No shame reminders for newbie, just follow the standard procedure. Almost 50 security violation tickets were logged in the next 2 days. His desk happened to be closer to the elevator atrium, break room, and bathrooms, so a lot of normal traffic. He was in security retraining the following Monday. We were in an open floor plan, and I could see how mad he was talking to his manager and gesturing in my direction quite a bit. Not my fault, I had only opened 2 tickets. His manager asked me to let up. Sorry, just following standard procedure. If I don't report these violations, I'm liable. Dude's computer was locked for the rest of the day of that Monday only. The following day, as I walked by, there was his email for all eyes to see, and newbie nowhere to be found. He happened to be getting coffee, which was my destination as well, and I told him I noticed he forgot to lock his computer. He cussed me out and speed walked back. The damage was done. He'd already had a dozen tickets opened by others, and the security policy had changed at some point. Now it was a quick retraining, then straight to disciplinary action. No write-ups. He had to attend a meeting with his boss, director, and some security folks. I would find out much later that he got put on a security-related performance improvement plan. He was gone in a week. No one was out to ruin anyone's career here, but if you want to work in security and flagrantly violate policy because I don't know why, well, you don't belong here. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CoderJoe1. It says, "Yup, after getting shamed and a warning, I set my lock screen up to look like an open email client. Had plenty of fun with that one until the admin undid my changes." I can't say I ever sent an email from a coworker's unlocked computer, but I can say that I did the fun one of taking a screenshot of their desktop, setting that as the background, putting all of their icons into a hidden folder in a corner, and then rotating the desktop upside down. That is a more fun way to play with it because they come back and then you get to watch them struggle. This story comes to us from Aggravating Ice 5575. Need all the equipment back? Fine. This project is all yours too. Good morning. Inspired by another post of removed admin privileges, here is one of my tales of internal concepts not meeting external realities. I was working remotely for a European-based manufacturer of, at least my division, high-end broadcast processing equipment. They also made other pro equipment, but this area was the highest end and by far the most technically demanding. Very niche-y, very configuration dependent, etc. Great technical staff and developers in Europe. We had a great relationship, being a bunch of tech nerds who could talk about IP ranges and capacitor values for hours. The US office just took orders from HQ over there. Had some good basic techs, but not set up to do any high-end troubleshooting, which is exactly why I existed. There was an acquisition coming up and auditors started to be involved. We had to send inventory of all of our computers and test gear, etc. Fine, whatever. Well, remember that setup dependent part? I was right in the middle of a huge project with one of the largest US broadcasters, which had already resulted in one of the largest upgrade sales this division had ever made, and was testing some fresh from the sandbox SNMP features. This is pretty old tech that is still being used, so I enlisted an older super micro server I had barely been using for remotely accessing some kit in my workshop to do some basic SNMP functions to make sure these new features didn't bung anything up before I literally put them on air on 50 plus stations. Things were working fine with tests. I'd get a new revision first thing in the morning, bang on it a bit, send it off to my tech contract by my end of day at the network, which was his morning. Not terribly difficult, but pretty nichey, and also one reason I worked for this company, no one knew at all what any of this was in North America. So auditors are involved, and the North American office that just takes orders sees this super micro server on the inventory list, and it's just the end of the world. Why is there a server out in the field? Why do you need so much test equipment? Who approved this? Etc. My first couple replies were disregarded because no one knew what I was talking about. A decision was made that this server had to go back. A third insistence from me that this was actively used and who else would take this over fell on deaf ears. It was the most important thing in the entire world that they get this server back. It's a junky old Supermicro 1RU utility beast that cost maybe $1,000 at the most. For whatever reason, I was feeling extra snarky the day I should have boxed the server up, so I wrote an extra friendly note to all the techs, the decision makers at the US office, and to my tech contact and his boss at the network, introducing everyone, thanking them for taking over this critical project, and thanking HQ for helping take on this time-sensitive test phase that would really help me get to other critical projects. About 25 minutes later, I sent tracking information for all the kit I was supposed to send back. Still didn't box up the server. About an hour later, I get a really odd email from one of the decision makers in the US office. He doesn't want to admit that no one at HQ doesn't know what the heck I was talking about technically, and simultaneously realized this is a huge account that would totally affect their bonuses if another nice sale came through. They were trying to save face and cover their tax by suggesting maybe I get them up to speed on the project before we do anything drastic. I just replied to his email with the tracking information again and mentioned I had suggested this 3 times now. 25 minutes later, I get a freaked out phone call from the head tech at the US headquarters. Him and his supervisor, the decision maker, have just got a very nice call from my contact's boss at the network. They were so happy with the service so far. I had a great relationship at this point, and excited that having someone else checking these updates would allow me to be on site more, big future plans, etc. He's wondering who is going to do this work now. Now this comes up? I just repeated that 3 times this was brought up now, so clearly this decision was educated. They know best. So now there's full-blown panic at US headquarters. Knowing this, I send a note to the developers in Europe to make sure the new updated code goes to the catch-all address for the US headquarters tech team, and not me, because they will be doing the testing going forward. This has the desired effect, because now the head of development in Europe is on the horn with the decision maker in the US, wondering about who they recently hired without approval to be able to have these in-house resources now. By the time that UPS pickup was supposed to have happened, somehow having this old server back was no longer the highest priority. In fact, I never heard about the server again. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Rambling Reflections. It says, "Enjoyed this more than I expected I would. The, oh wow, thanks for taking this off my hands approach is a great way to do malicious compliance." Another commenter down below called Illuminatus Prime said, "All this and no one thought to call your bluff. Remind me to never play poker with you. Well done." Alright, we can summarize this one as, you want this computer back, you can have it, but then you need to do my job, and you don't know how to do my job, so let's see how that turns out. Yep, I absolutely love the approach that OP took in this one of, hey, you want to do that? It's going to be out of my hands. Sometimes you just need to sit back and watch the world burn. Alright, I think we'll end this one here. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us on your preferred podcasting platform. If you're on Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video because it really does help us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.